Well, I've had to work on some technical issues with this Flashback Express. I was saying last time in session 14, this is session 15, that the sons of Zebedee don't appear in the Gospel of John or the fourth Gospel. Actually, those of Zebedee are mentioned in the additional chapter 21. I don't think it even says the sons of Zebedee, just the ones of Zebedee. So I think the author of that gospel deliberately does not identify the beloved disciple as John, and that's all I really want to get into right now. The other thing I said regarding the call of the first disciples was that they were fishermen, and since our approach is very much based on Old Testament commentary, if we see parallels or possible parallels, we'll mention them. And there is a fisherman passage in Jeremiah 16 and following, used in a negative sense. Yahweh is going to send fishermen who will fish you or catch you, and also many hunters who will hunt you down. You will pay, or I will pay you twice for your guilt. So this would correspond to what we were talking about in the beginning of Isaiah 40, where reversal and eschatological salvation is promised. It says there that Jerusalem has paid twice for its guilt. And so you have that kind of reversal. And you could go on to other passages. Let me just look at Revelation 18:6 and see what that one says. Basically, pay her twice the measure according to her works, talking about Babylon. Prepared twice the cup that she prepared, etc. In Leviticus 26, you have a seven-fold punishment for breaking the covenant, etc. So I wanted to mention that. But that having been said, we're now ready to dive into the meat, so to speak, of the Gospel of Mark, uh, which is the teaching or the uh, event in the synagogue of Capernaum. Jesus is set up headquarters in Capernaum, I think in Peter's house. There's an Anchor Bible Dictionary article on Capernaum which talks about Peter's house being a nice waterfront Sea of Galilee house near the synagogue, a Herodian house, not a little. If he was a fisherman, he had workers, and he was a businessman. These were not just blokes off the street. And so, again, as I said, there are various ways of reading the Gospel of Mark. My particular way is based very much on my dissertation on the temple act in Mark 11:15 through 17, which, to properly understand, I think involves the whole gospel. And my approach is going to be very much based on what that represents. And so we'll see a connection between this first exorcism, if you will, and the temple act. So he comes to the synagogue on Sabbath, as he was his custom, and he began to teach. So Mark is going to talk a lot about Jesus' teaching. He doesn't say too much about the content of the teaching. There's a famous content, I think, in chapter 7, where he talks about what makes you impure is what comes out of you, not what enters into you, which would seem to correspond to Ezekiel 22, which accuses the priests of not distinguishing between pure and impure. And so you could look at that as some sort of reversal of this failure by the priests. We'll get to that probably later. But the people are astonished at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority and not as the scribes. Now, we talked about authority before, and I can tell you that it really is a bad way to convey what's going on. The word in Greek is exousia, which I would translate in Latin. You have a wonderful way to translate it, potestas, which is what the screen is going to show, quasi potestatem habens. So potestas is this plenipotentiary dominion given to the Son of Man in Daniel 7. We talked a little bit about that. That word exousia in the Greek of Daniel 7 appears 3 times. All exousia was given to him. In Aramaic, it's shaltan, shaltan, shaltan. And this is the great authority given to this one like a son of man. It's almost like an intimation. He's not exactly just human. Some scholars believe it could be the Archangel Michael and some other quasi-divine figures. Even Melchizedek is considered a divine hypostasis by Rabbi Joseph Baumgarten, great Qumran scholar. And so I mentioned that Daniel Boyarin's book, The Jewish Gospels, where the real offensive claim of Jesus is not so much Son of God or Messiah, which could be interchangeable in the Old Testament, but rather the Son of Man. You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand. That's the blasphemy in the trial in Mark 14. And so that we'll see how interesting this episode is set out. We mentioned the word immediately. It appears here again. There was in their synagogue, a man with an unclean spirit. So the elimination of unclean spirits is an eschatological expectation in various places. I think in Zechariah it would be one of the great passages in Zechariah 13. We talked a little bit about prophets will be eliminated and they won't wear the hairy mantle. We said that in one of the prior sessions. I will extirpate or cut off from this land the names of idols, and the spirit of impurity I will remove from this land or earth. And so there you have an expectation that in the end time, you can look at it as the exousia of unclean spirits or the exousia of the beasts that we mentioned in Daniel 7. The dominion of the beasts, these empires that had oppressed Israel that represent evil that come out of the sea in Daniel 7, their exousia is removed by the Ancient of Days and given to one like a son of man. And I think you have a depiction of that right here. And we talked about the iceberg aspect of Mark. On the surface, you could read that. Many people read it and they say, okay, so he exorcised some guy and he taught them. I wonder what he taught them. And you don't see the real submerged aspect of the iceberg. And so this possessed man cries out and says, what have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? And the Bibles usually put it as a question, but there's no punctuation in the original manuscripts. This could well be an assertion. You have come to destroy us, as these unclean spirits will be repeating or claiming, protesting against Jesus as he does these exorcisms, which are key, I think. And the casting out of these unclean spirits is related to when he casts out these money changers and dove sellers and buyers and sellers in the temple acts. So I think that this ekbalo verb in Greek, the casting out verb, um, is being used in various linked ways, suggestive ways, and interpretive ways. Mark likes to dovetail or sandwich or connect things, which is really one of the main approaches we're going to be using here to connect things and round off their significance or significances. I almost want to say, I know who you are, the Holy One of God. And when I was doing again my doctoral research for my dissertation, I think it's Ernst Lohmeyer, one of the great, German Bible scholars from the early 20th century. He connects this with Psalm 106:16, where Aaron is called the Holy One of God. So he calls this, I think, a priestly appellative. And then, of course, in the Eucharistic discourse in John 6, Peter's confession, rather than Messiah or Son of God or something, there in John 6, at the end, Peter confessed, we know you are the Holy One of God. And so I think that we have, sort of glimmers of a priestly language here, not developed at all in Mark. But you can go to my website, Bible Explainer. Maybe if you type Chavez, my last name, you'll get my website. And there in my Mark notes, I have about 70 pages or so where I do develop as much as I could, I guess, the priesthood of Christ, even in the Gospel of Mark. We'll have to discuss that as we go along. I didn't get into that in my dissertation so much many years before. So here, Jesus rebukes this man. This rebuke would be a typical exorcism command of power and dominion of and he says to him phimo theti, which really literally means muzzle yourself, like a beast would put on a muzzle. You would put a muzzle on a beast, a dog, a rabid dog or something, so it won't bite. And this is going to be the same command and the same kind of language that is going to be used when Jesus addresses the sea in the tempest in Mark 4. So there you have, we talked about the sea and the beast coming out of the sea in Daniel, and we're going to look at Mark 4 later. But I just wanted to right away mention that connection there. So again, as you can see, these Bibles, you can imagine how awkward a translation would be that says muzzle yourself. Obmuteshe, mute yourself. It's probably a little bit stronger in the Latin, but nevertheless, the actual muzzle. Let me try this. I'm not too familiar yet with this, accordance, put to silence, but it does so. Even this dictionary in this program doesn't quite cover what I thought might be covered. So convulsing him, cried out with a loud voice, came out of him. And so he's able to cast out this unclean spirit. And this is what gets very interesting. They were all amazed. This is a recurrent theme in Mark, and Luke has a lot of astonishment passages also. They were all amazed, and so they question or speak to themselves. They question among themselves, saying, "What is this? A new teaching according to exousia." So in Greek, it's a didache kaine, a new didache teaching. I've associated this with Torah, which is a word that really means instruction, teaching, priestly teaching. It later evolves into this law translation in Greek, nomos, and in Aramaic, dot, is used in that term in Ezra, where the Persian government is now really asking the Jews, you better have a law to enforce to govern yourselves, and this is now the name given in Aramaic to the Torah. But the Torah originally is a teaching thing that priests did regarding pure and impure and other questions put to priests in Judaism. But look at how the teaching is described. It's according to exousia. So it's a powerful teaching. Now, you might say, okay, so he spoke very authoritatively, not the scribes who would maybe stuttered or something. I don't think it's that at all. It is defined in the following way. He even commands the unclean spirits, and they obeyed him. And so the actual teaching, or didache, or you might even say Torah, or divine order that Jesus is inaugurating and establishing, is the divine order where real impurity and uncleanliness coming from the evil world is under his authority, under his exousia of one like a son of man, from the Daniel background. And so I read it from one of the sources that I was studying. A new teaching with authority, defined as being able to command the unclean spirits, and they obey him. The word exousia in Greek actually can be defined as the ability or power to act unhindered. It's basically the ability to do what you want. And in this sense, the imposition of the divine order through the teaching of Jesus, and then his fame spreads. And so I don't think we want to get into anything else right now to keep within the time. He also will teach in the temple, by the way, when he expels everyone and overturns the tables, etc. He begins to cast out these people, it says, the text says. And then he taught them, saying, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a cave of bandits, etc. We'll have to look at that some other time. I think we've run out of time.